Hey guys, I am super excited to be with you today for our last Q&A about propagating succulents. So if you've missed them, you can catch all the replays for these live videos, the Q&A sessions, if you just go to succulentsandsunshine.com/FB-propagation, or there's a link in the description. And then today is also the last day for, something, guys, something. The beauty of life. Today is also the last day to sign up for the Successfully Propagating Succulents course. And so in that course, I'm teaching you how to propagate from leaves, from cuttings, from seeds, and from division. And I will give you all the tutorials you need there on how to get started, how to get your succulents through from that baby phase into adulthood, and just lots of great tips in there to help you grow more succulents, mostly from the ones that you have, or at least for very cheap. So I'm super excited about that. We've actually already had some people finish the course and say that it's been super helpful for them. They got their questions answered. They are on their way to propagating lots and lots of succulent babies. So super fun. So again, you can get that at succulentsandsunshine.com/propagate. And today we're going to be focusing mostly on growing succulents from offsets or division. And if you have any questions, if you're on live, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'm going to try and give priority to those. We usually go about a half an hour, but I'll try and make sure we get to everyone's questions today who's on live. And then we also have some questions that were submitted earlier for people who knew they wouldn't be able to make it live, some questions they wanted answered. So let's get to that stuff. So the first question that we have today is kind of just right along the basics of propagating from division, and that is, when is the right time to propagate from offsets or division, and does it depend on the size? Are there times when it's better not to? So, sorry, I'm gonna shift my chair a little because I'm getting a funny vibration. So really, you can, any time of year is generally okay to propagate succulents from offsets. But there are some things that I would look out for that will help you be more successful. Because with a lot of propagation, really any time of year is fine as long as you can get the right environment. So fairly warm weather, so like 70s is ideal, lots of bright indirect sunlight, and then just enough water, which is the biggest thing that is usually a problem with propagation, the babies. So with division, I would recommend propagating in the spring or the fall. For most succulents, it'll be spring. So with sempervivums, they are growing all throughout the spring and summer. And so if you do your divisions, if you break them apart in the spring, then those babies will be ready to be actively growing, and they're a lot more likely to take root and grow faster because they'll have the whole summer to grow. So that's generally my recommendation, is at the beginning of their active growing season. Aloes are usually, I should have verified this because I always get mixed up. So aloes here in Arizona, they usually like bloom during the winter. And so I would recommend dividing them in the fall because they'll usually be growing a little bit more throughout the winter. But again, they still are taking advantage of the most temperate times of year. So when it gets really cold, they're not going to be growing as much. But when they're actively growing, when it's really cold, they are not going to be growing quite as much. But aloes do like the cooler time of year to grow. So, you know, for us, that's like October, November, and I'm in Phoenix, so we're a zone 9, but it does get cold enough in like the end of December, early January, where they will stop growing for a minute because it gets down to about freezing. So with aloes, I'd recommend starting in like September or October when it's cooled down. Sempervivums start in the spring, so April or May, generally after your last frost. And then the other thing that you want to look for with division is the size of the babies. And that was part of the question here. Does it depend on the size? Yes. So the bigger the pup or the chick is, the better it will survive on its own without the mother plant. So I like to recommend, I recommend waiting until they're about an inch in size. If you're in the US, that's about the size of a quarter if you want to like actually go measure. So about the size of a quarter or larger. There are some sempervivums though that are miniature, and so they won't ever get to be an inch in size. And with those, I recommend keeping a group of the babies together and not actually dividing them up into individual like one-off baby plants. They'll do better if they stay in like a little grouping. So I actually have though an aloe that I want to show you. It is beastly. So I got this thing at Home Depot, and it's big, and what was it, 20 bucks. So you can see there are like dozens of babies in here, and a lot of them they're all different sizes. So I've actually taken it apart already. I used this same plant to show you. Ooh. Wait for the plane to come by. I used the same plant in the course to show you like how to take divisions. So you can see like these are part of the same plant. They were all together in the same bundle, but clearly very different sizes. So this one is definitely big enough that it would be okay all by itself, and you can see it has a bunch of roots. If you can get roots with your offsets or your chicks, that is always ideal, and that is going to dramatically improve the chance of success of that little baby. It will make it so that you don't have to do as much of the work with the watering and all of that. On the other hand, this little cutie, who is just tiny, tiny, he does still have some roots. So he'll actually do okay. Oh, sorry, it looked like there was mealybug on there. That was gonna be fun. He'll actually do okay by himself, but he's gonna need a lot more water than the bigger offset, right? So this is going to take a lot more care from you. This one not as much, because it's going to be more self-sustaining. But there were just like dozens and dozens in here. So this is a really good plant to buy. Like when I actually picked this one out because it had so many offsets here. So if you can find a plant like that when you're buying them, as long as it still looks healthy, I would go for this over a bigger succulent most days, because it's more succulents. And when you take them apart, you can nourish them into growing to a bigger plant. So lots of these little babies. I do try and keep a root with them as much as possible when you're making that division. And with these, let's see, I'm trying to balance this all on my lap. You just break it off, and I try and kind of, just pull them apart. I'm shaking the soil off as I do this. And yeah, that's it. You just break it apart. Leave it for a couple days to dry, just like any propagation that you do, like with a leaf or cutting. You want it to dry. You want the roots to heal. And sometimes you'll actually break away part of the stem as well. So just wait for it to heal. So that's kind of the basics of propagation by division. And that's with pups. So haworthias, aloes, agaves, gasterias. I'm trying to think of any other ones that come to mind right now. Those will all propagate from offsets. So to my knowledge, you can't propagate one of these from a leaf. You maybe could, but it doesn't have a stem like a lot of other succulents do. I mean, it grows together, but it doesn't have like a traditional stem. So I don't think you can grow from a leaf. But it puts off so many pups of its own that you don't really have to worry about that. Sorry, gotta set these all down. Okay, so, and there was something else I was gonna say with that. Oh, but then with sempervivums, which are a little bit different, they still grow chicks, right? But they're on a stolon, so they have just this little strand, a little cord that keeps them connected to the mother plant and provides nutrients to them, not unlike a human child. So with the sempervivums, those I definitely wait until they've either rooted on their own or until they're like a pretty good size, like again about an inch or bigger, and then you just cut the stolon, and then it's up to you now. It's up to you and that little baby plant to keep it alive. So you'll find you have to water more frequently. So I let it dry, set it on top of soil, and then just get that soil wet every couple days. And once it's rooted, then you can cut back on your watering. Okay, and actually that was the other question that we had, was how big should the chicks get with hens and chicks before you remove them from the mother. So if they are a fairly large growing sempervivum, so I mean they get to be, you know, at least 2 or 3 inches in diameter, I would wait till they're about an inch. And then if they are a smaller variety, like Pixie, I think is, yeah, I mean Pixie is small, but anyway, so sempervivum Pixie is one that just grows like in this really cute mat, but it just puts off tons of babies, but they're really small. They might not get any bigger than half an inch. With those, then just divide them, but keep a little grouping together so that, again, it's about an inch in size or a little bit bigger, so they have a little bit more nutrients to pull from, and get as many roots as you can when you are dividing those. Yeah, so this is good. Okay, we're gonna switch over to the live questions. Oh, Mandy says, I'm trying to propagate my sedum Little Missy, and I was told to just place the stem cuttings in the soil. Since I'm using the Bonsai Jack soil, it's very gritty, and because the sedum is so tiny, they just kind of fall into the soil with only the leaves keeping them upright. Will they still sprout roots in the Bonsai Jack soil, or should I propagate them in a different soil? So this is one of the challenges for me with Bonsai Jack soil, which, as most of you know, and if you don't know, I'll just say right now, I love Bonsai Jack soil. It's like the biggest lifesaver for indoor succulents. However, sedum Little Missy and I have a really rough relationship because it needs a lot more water than I am used to giving most succulents. So, will it sprout roots in the Bonsai Jack soil? Yes, it can. However, what I would probably do, you have kind of, there's 2 options that you could take with this. So one of them would be to try water propagation, which is going to be a little bit tricky with Little Missy because it's so small. But what you could maybe do is just get like a little ramekin, or just even just a plate would work, just with like a, you know, just so it curves down a little bit, and fill the bottom of that with water, and then put the stem of the Little Missy plant right there on the plate. And then just make sure it stays next to a lot of water for a few days until it starts putting out roots. And then once those roots start to form, then go ahead and put it back into the soil, and just make sure that you're watering it daily for at least a week, maybe 2 or 3, until the roots have really reached down into the soil. Because yeah, the gritty aspect of the Bonsai Jack mix is fantastic for succulents with roots. It's a little bit harder for babies because it doesn't retain as much water, and so that they're not reaching all the way down to the bottom of the pot. And so when that top layer dries out, they no longer have access to water other than themselves and the humidity around them. So putting it on a plate could work, and just like keeping that plate basically full of water. I would maybe try one with the stem in the water and one with the stem out, but make sure they have definitely dried out before you put them in the water. Take the cutting, let it dry out, and then put it in the water, and then put one just next to the water and see which one does better. I wouldn't leave it in the water for too long because that causes the succulent to become used to constant access to water, which makes them not as drought tolerant. And so then when you transition to the soil, it's a little bit trickier to get them to stay rooted and to stay rooted and to stay really full and healthy, because they don't like the drought as much. And for me, Little Missy doesn't like drought as much anyway. It's one that needs more water, and so so I would recommend not leaving it in the water propagation area for too long. The other alternative would be to just put a little bit of Coconut Coir right on top of the Bonsai Jack mix where you are planting that cutting, and then stick Little Missy right into into that little pile of Coconut Coir. And the Coconut Coir will retain a lot more water while still providing some good airflow. And that would probably be my preference, would be to do it that way, because then it'll be growing right into the pot where you want it. It'll be growing into good soil. You just have like a little dime-sized mound or something of the coconut coir that it can use to root better. So that would be my recommendation, just to get it going. Just get it going in the pot that you're in, while still utilizing the Bonsai Jack soil. And it won't be enough that it's gonna like ruin the Bonsai Jack mix or cause problems down the road, because it'll only be right on the top. And honestly, by the time the succulent has actually rooted, most of that soil will probably have washed away down into the mix and out of the pot. So that'd be good. Okay, Kelly says, how big should the stem baby be before you remove it, please? Yeah, so I will probably say this a lot, but for me, an inch is a beautiful size for any plant, for propagation. So whether it's a stem like an echeveria or Graptopetalum or something along that line, where they have a very clear stem and they put babies out off of the stem, I usually wait till they're about an inch in size. Can you do it when they're smaller? Yes. Is it more difficult? I think so. And it requires more work, which for me means more difficult, because the whole point for me of succulents is they don't need as much attention or fussiness. I don't have to pay attention to them every day and water every day. So I would wait till they're about an inch, cut it, let it dry, plant it in soil, water every day for 2 weeks. Well, not every day, every other day for about 2 weeks, and then gradually cut back. But with that inch size, they have enough water that they're not going to just dry up immediately, because they have enough water stored in their leaves. But they also are still small enough that it's fun to, like, it's still a baby, right? And you can still grow it. So yeah, so about an inch in size, both for stems and for leaves. Sorry, that's probably super loud, but my phone overheated on Saturday when I was doing this. So I have an ice pack to try and cool it down, to keep it cool, because it's 100 today. So super fun. Okay, Ellie says, this isn't really a propagation question, but I thought of it after the last live video. I've seen someone grow succulents in a hydro soil-free garden. The water level went up and down, so it wasn't sitting in water. Have you heard of this? Do you know how it compares to soil? So, I mean, I think I know what you're talking about, and the concept is really similar, I think, to water propagation. It can work, but for me, it defeats the point of growing succulents, because succulents are drought tolerant, and I don't feel like I've never done it, so I can't say for sure, like, oh yes, it will work or it won't work. It could work, and I'm sure people do it and make it work, because you can usually figure out a way to make it work. But I feel like your succulents are going to be happier in soil, because they have nutrients. They do have access to water in the soil while the soil is drying out. And I guess it would be the same in like the in like a hydro garden, that there'd be humidity that they could pull the water from. I don't know. You could try it. If you try it, let me know. I'd be curious to see how it works out. But I do feel like in the long run, they're probably going to be better off in soil, just because that's naturally where they would grow. So in general, I think gardeners take plants that are not conducive to the area where they live, and they try and force them to grow there. I do that with succulents. But, you know, they're pretty and we want to make them work for us. So I think you could make it work, but it's best, in my opinion, if you can grow the succulent in an environment as similar to the one where it grows naturally. So that would be my thought on that. Okay, and then Chris says, can you grow the topsy-turvy echeveria with a leaf? Yeah, you totally can. It's a little bit trickier to remove the leaf from the stem, but it can definitely be done. And I've grown one or two before, and I don't feel like it was especially difficult or harder than any other echeverias I've done. The trickiest thing for me was just getting the stem off, because it's just a little bit of a funny shape with that V shape. But yeah, just do a gentle twist and you should be golden. So yeah, man, leaf propagation is so much fun. And honestly, there are more succulents that propagate from leaves than I realized, and I just keep finding more and more. I'm pretty sure I showed you guys this on one of the days. I don't remember which day. I'm gonna, ooh, sorry, turn around for a second. So this is, try not to trip. So these are both from, whoa, there's my hand. These are both from a Kalanchoe copper spoons. And this one, initially, it had just fallen to the bottom of the pot, and I pulled it out, getting ready to throw this away, and I noticed, wow. Anyway, I noticed there were some babies growing on it. So super, super fun. But yeah, I would just give it a try. You never know what might sprout. Kalanchoes are especially fun, and I love that Kalanchoe Kelly is on here today. Super appropriate. But yeah, Kalanchoes are really fun because a lot of them will grow them like along the edge instead of at the base like those were, or like most do. I'm going to show you another one really quick that propagates along the edge. So let's see. Okay, so this is Kalanchoe. I don't even know how to pronounce its name. Does it have a tag? It's going to show you the tag. Oh, they must not have had the tag for them. But this one, if you remove a leaf, it will grow right along the edges. So, yeah. It's just a cool one. And it's one that I did not realize actually grew from leaves. But, you know, Mother of Thousands, I think most of us are pretty familiar with. And that one obviously grows from leaves. But here's Mother of Thousands without babies on the leaves. And then since we're just chatting, I'll show you my big one that is amazing and blooming. But yeah, so just give it a try. But yes, topsy-turvy. Sorry, that was like a really big tangent from your answer. But yeah, topsy-turvy can grow from leaves. Most of my babies have been knocked off here because my kids like to pull them off. Let's see if we can find them. There's a couple. Dun, da, da. But normally the edges of these are just covered with babies. But just so you know, 3- and 5-year-olds really like to take the little babies off. So, sweet. Okay. Awesome. Okay, and then Nicole says, how much soil or perlite do you typically use for repotting? I'm going to answer your question, but I just want you to know I'm going to send you to a link to, or we can add it in the description with a more detailed answer, because I feel like that's a little bit of a loaded question, because it really depends on your area. Okay, wow. Sorry, guys. It really depends on your area. However, for general potting purposes, so I use almost exclusively Bonsai Jack Mix, which Patrick, I'm going to answer your question in just a second about soil too. So the Bonsai Jack Mix is 1/3 turfus, which is a kiln-fired calcined clay. I did a really technical video for Jack, so I got all these good like terminology. But it's basically, I mean, it's just a really high-fired clay. And so it absorbs some water. Like, think of terracotta, right? Terracotta is a kiln-fired clay, although it's a low fire. But yeah, so that's 1 part turfus, 1 part bonsai block, which is very, very similar to crushed granite, which is what I used originally. And I actually don't know what the difference is between crushed granite and bonsai block, other than Bonsai Jack told me it was better, and he does all the testing, and so we roll with it. And then 1 part pine bark fines. So 2/3 inorganic material. So the turfus and the bonsai block or crushed granite, those are both inorganic. And then 1/3 organic, which is the pine bark fines. But here's the kicker. The most important thing with soil for like fully grown or well-rooted succulent plants, normal-sized ones as opposed to babies, the most important thing is a large particle size, so roughly a 1/4 inch. And that's one of the biggest problems with peat-based soils, which most of the bagged cactus and succulent mixes you're going to buy at the store are going to be peat-based, and they're just so dense that it's really hard for succulents to thrive in them long-term, especially indoors, because there's less airflow, and so they don't dry out as quickly. And then peat also repels water when it's completely dry, and that causes issues. And if you were on at the beginning, I mentioned that right now we have the Successfully Propagating Succulents course available for sale, which just talks about propagating. But I also have a course called Successfully Growing Succulents, and in there I show you like some side-by-side comparisons of a store-bought cactus mix versus the Bonsai Jack mix, which I guess technically could be store-bought, but really just to demonstrate what particle size does, and then also avoiding peat. So how much soil to perlite do you typically use? So if you're using a bagged mix, I would highly, highly suggest trying out just like a gallon of Bonsai Jack mix. That's one of the few products that I will just over and over again just tell you how amazing it is for growing succulents indoors. It just is so, so good for them. But if you do want to use a bag mix, or if that's what you have, I would do half soil, half perlite at least. If not doing, the hard thing with perlite is that it's really fragile, so it breaks very easily. Like you can squish perlite in your fingers, and so you don't want to do a lot more than 50% perlite to soil, because eventually the perlite is just going to break down into dust. So I would use pumice instead if you can. A really coarse grained sand, so roughly 1/4 inch particle sizes, are also options. And then I would avoid peat if possible. And so Patrick just asked, is that coconut coir? And I think that's when we were looking at the leaf babies. So yes, coconut coir is my go-to for anything propagation. And I mentioned that earlier with the question about the sedum little missy. So the thing that I love about coconut coir is, unlike peat moss or peat-based soils, it doesn't repel water when it's dry. So with peat, you have to like spray it, wait a minute, spray it, wait a minute, wait for that water to penetrate, or just like let it sit on top and it takes a while to soak through. Sometimes it doesn't soak all the way through. Coconut coir doesn't have that problem, but it is still a lot finer, more like a peat-based soil. So I have loved it for growing seeds, for propagating leaves, because it's much easier to cover the roots, and because it doesn't have that 1/4 inch particle size like the gritty mix, which is good for full-grown plants. And if you've ever ordered from Mountain Crest Gardens, you'll actually notice that well, you may not know that that's what it is, but that's what they use for growing their plants. So all of their 2-inch plants are planted in coconut coir, because it drains well, which peat doesn't, but it also, coconut coir also retains just enough water for it to like stay damp, but not soggy and gross, which is what peat does. I know that some of you are like, I have to go repot everything. If what you have is working, don't change it. If you have problems, then change it. Because the peat-based soils work for some people. It really just depends on where you live. And it does take a little bit of experimenting to figure out what the best option is going to be for you. So Patrick, yes, coconut coir is fantastic for propagating from leaves. I'm actually testing it with a few pots outside here, because the Bonsai Jack mix is great for indoor succulents. For outdoors, when it gets to be 120 degrees in the summer, it dries out a little bit too quickly for my outdoor pot. And so I am testing just some other soils, and one of them is just completely planting in coconut coir to see if that works. I still feel like it stays wet too long though, even when it's super hot outside, because then in the cooler parts of the year, it's just a little too damp. So I need to find, I've been talking to Jack about that actually, Bonsai Jack, to see if we should mix it with like some turfus or pumice or that type of thing. So I will hopefully have an update on that at some point. Okay, Mercedes says, I put my leaves in soil and sprayed once a day in the morning. All my leaves got mushy and died. Any advice? I'm new to all of this. So, I'm going to try and watch for, ooh, we got lots of comments now, folks. Awesome. So Mercedes, if you're still on, let me know if you live in a humid climate, because that can play a role. Oftentimes when the soil, or when it's humid, the leaves don't actually need help from you as much, but it's just, there's a huge variable there. The other reason why they may have died is not drying out the ends before they were laid on top of soil and sprayed with water. Another reason could be that they just weren't healthy in the first place. So I had a bunch of leaves that I removed to propagate on that cute little orange table I showed you. And for the most part, all of them took and survived. But there were a couple that got super mushy. But they've all been cared for the exact same way. I let them dry out for 2 or 3 days, 4 or 5 maybe. They dried out a lot. And then I put them all in the soil. They're getting about the same amount of water. I'm sure it varies slightly from like one side of the planter to the other, but leaves around it were perfectly healthy and growing, whereas a couple of them rotted. So a lot of times it's just that the leaf wasn't healthy in the first place. The other reason that could be happening is I have a theory going that I need to validate, that succulents do actually absorb water from contact with the leaves. And so if you have water pooling on top of the leaves, that can cause them to be mushy, because that's like super quick access to water for them. They just let it in through their cells and voila, water, they're full. But they don't stop when they're full. They just keep taking up more water because they're drought plants. So that could be it as well. But yeah. So, and actually, I think it was not just this past Saturday, but the first FAQ that we did on Saturday, I don't know, the 20th maybe, I talked more about leaves, and if you want to go back and watch that replay, there's a link to all the replays in the description, and I talked more about that in detail too. So maybe not watering as frequently, but maybe also just making sure that the leaves that you're removing are healthy as possible. Okay. Barb said, I had a small succulent, a little rosette in an arrangement, and when I watered it today, I saw that it has no roots. So I'll try to propagate, but I'm wondering what happened to its roots. Oh, where did that go? This was a 2-inch succulent from Mountain Crest that I've had for 6 months. It had roots when I planted it. I'm still trying to figure out watering. Have very low humidity, use Bonsai Jack soil. The water goes in and all comes out. Would no roots indicate not enough water? Okay, I'm just gonna reread that to make sure I'm understanding. Okay, yeah, so if you are in a low humidity area with Bonsai Jack soil, you will need to water more frequently until it gets a really strong established root system. So if it doesn't have roots right now, most likely the answer is yes. It's not getting enough water. It's possible that they all rotted and the rot didn't spread up to the upper plant, which is great. But for the most part, I would say, especially where you live in a dry climate, sorry, let me adjust this so I can see better, that it just hasn't gotten enough water. So I would say go ahead and put it back in its pot and then just try watering it. If it doesn't have roots, you could water it daily. Just treat it like it's a cutting. So water it daily for 3 or 4 days, then cut back to watering every 2 days for a week, then every 3 days, then every 4 days, and just gradually reduce the amount of water that you're giving it. You could also try just sprinkling a little bit of that Coconut Coir on top to retain a little bit more water initially, and then it'll eventually wash out as you keep watering it. And with the Bonsai Jack soil, the water is going to go in and it's going to come right out, but it will absorb water. I still try and like pour it on twice just to make sure it's really getting soaked all the way through. But yeah, a lot of the water is going to flow out. So I feel like yours is maybe just still in that baby phase enough where it does need more frequent watering. Elaine just asked, can you buy the Jax mix? Yes. So I can throw links in the description. But I think if you go to succulentsandsunshine.com/FB-main soil, that will take you to the post about the soil. I should just know these offhand. I think you can also do succulentsandsunshine.com/Jack will probably take you there as well to just buy it from his website. So yeah, but you can buy it online. That's the only place you can buy it right now is online. But it is amazing for indoor succulents. I've used it. Oh, hey, look at that, Patrick. Thank you. Patrick threw the link in there, Elaine, which you maybe already saw because that was a bit ago. So cool. Thanks, guys. Look at you guys keeping up with each other. I love it. Brenda says, I do some straight bonsai jack for cacti and succulents that like more water. I also mix it in cactus soil for the ones, I'm guessing you meant that like less water. Yep. And then mix it in cactus soil for ones that like a bit more water. My lights dry my soil very quickly. Yeah, that's true. So with growing under grow lights really dries out plants fast. Even if you're using LEDs or fluorescents, it's just, there's still heat, there's more light there, and it does dry the soil out faster. So you'll need to water more. And then, but the other thing to keep in mind that's really important with Jack's Mix is the reason why it's so good is because it helps your succulents develop a really balanced root system. So this was really cool that I learned stuff all the time, guys. And Jack is incredibly knowledgeable and he has amazing customer support. So if you ever have questions and like want to know really geeky details about soil, Jack's your guy. And he's always happy to chat about it. Just know it'll be super technical, but it's fantastic. So one of the reasons why Jack's Gritty Mix works well and why the 1/4 inch particle size is so great is because it helps your succulents develop a really balanced root system. So you've likely seen succulents, I don't know. So these all have like pretty like thick roots, but these are actually, this is like very balanced. You can see they're all the same size. But you've likely seen succulents before where there's like one super thick root and then a bunch of smaller ones. That's not a balanced root system. So succulents like to have like a bunch of smaller roots that are all the same size. And the Gritty Mix helps encourage that. So as the succulent gets bigger and the roots are more well established in Jack's Mix, you'll get to that point where you're watering it less frequently. But most people have a problem with watering too much, or at least wanting to water too much. And so the Jack's Mix is like a breath of fresh air for that, because the mix that most succulents are sold in is too dense for them, and it's peat based, so it repels water and has some issues. It works well in a nursery when they're growing baby plants and they're taking care of lots of them in a nice controlled greenhouse environment. Less ideal as the plant gets bigger and is in an environment that is not a greenhouse. Yeah, cool. So there's a little lesson on soil for you today. Okay. Oh yeah, Mercedes, you live in the Midwest and it has been pretty cold. Yeah, I'm trying to remember now what the question was, but hopefully that answered it. Yeah, the cold weather can be tricky, and oh yeah, and you're saying the water could have pooled on the top. Yeah, so it's not the end of the world if water pools on the top of the leaves, and sometimes it works, but I would avoid it if you can. Okay, Nicole, hi from Houston. Super humid during the summer, yeah, and that's actually one thing different from you and me with Bonsai Jack Mix outside. Bonsai Jack Mix outside in hot, humid areas is fantastic because it will retain some of that water, but it stays dry so fast, and your succulents don't need as much water when it's so hot and humid in the summer. So yeah, Jack's Gritty Mix works great for hot, humid climates. Linda Belknap, who's in the group, she switched most of her outside stuff to it, and it's worked pretty well. Yeah. Okay, April says, I feel like I can get my leaves to start babies and roots, and then they just stop and they don't get bigger. Yes, I'm not sure what I can do to get them to the next step. This is like the trickiest part of propagating from leaves. I know there are people who have a hard time propagating, like getting them started, but really where the trickiness lies is exactly what you're describing, when they have roots and they have babies and then they just seem to stop growing. And the solution is they need more water, because they no longer have, even if they have the mother leaf still, there's not enough water from that mother leaf to keep them alive. And they're trying to find that balance of absorbing stuff from the roots versus taking it from the mother plant. And so it's all about watering consistency. So even when they start to get roots, I still recommend keeping the soil damp every day. Maybe cutting back to every other day of watering the leaves. But I did have one person on a live a few days ago say that she did rot one of her babies. But it is a lot more difficult than letting them dry out. They are super fast to dry out. So that's one thing also though I love about the Coconut Coir for propagating in, because it retains a lot of water, but it's fairly dry to the touch. So, and it's easy to cover the roots. That would be the other thing that I would suggest, is making sure those baby roots are covered. Because you know when they come out, they're like this hot pink, they're super thick, they just look really, really healthy. And then if you don't cover them in the next week or two, they're gonna just dry out. They'll kind of dry up and just be brown and crispy. So giving them more consistent water and covering the roots is going to take them through that tricky transition period and get them into adulthood. So that is really, that's really it. That's like the simplest thing. But it's also hard because they're succulents, and so you feel like they should go longer without water, but the babies are not. Yes. Okay. Renee just said, can you use a light compost tea solution on your succulents if you're using Bonsai Jack? Yes. So the fertilizer that I use almost exclusively for my succulents is a Manure Tea Fertilizer, which you can get at havenbrand.com. And I mix it up just like she recommends, and I use that on all of my plants, even my leaf propagation babies. It is so gentle, but also full of nutrients, that it works really well to just feed your plants. She says you can use it every time you water. Most of the time my succulents aren't getting enough light that I want them to grow that fast, but my outside stuff, I'll use it like once a month. So I would assume that compost tea would be the same, because I'm actually not like an all natural person, but I do feel like one of the problems with like Miracle-Gro fertilizer is they are so concentrated that a lot of times they will have, they can burn the plants because it's too much nutrients all at once, and it's not good for the plants. So if you're using Miracle-Gro, I recommend diluting it at least to half strength and maybe a quarter strength. And if you do it down to like a quarter strength, then you can use it a little bit more frequently, which I feel like is better for the succulents overall. So yeah, you can definitely use that for full-grown plants in the Bonsai Jack mix. You can also use fertilizer sparingly on your leaf babies. And for seeds, when I did the seed FAQ, I talked about a guy named Kevin Vaughn who hybridizes sempervivums. So he comes up with all of these awesome cross-pollinations that make really beautiful sempervivum varieties. And his trick for getting seeds to grow faster is he uses a fertilizer called Quick Start, which is a Miracle-Gro brand. And he just mixes it up like it says and applies it like it says to his seeds, and it makes them grow so much faster. So if you're growing from seed, that's a really good tip. So fertilizer is really awesome. Oh, April ordered Coconut Coir today. Sweet. Elaine, the fertilizer, it's called Manure Tea Fertilizer, and the website that you can buy it from is havenbrand.com. I think she also has manuretea.com too. But if you look up Annie Havenbrand Manure Tea Fertilizer, if you just do a Google search for that, you will find it. You can also go to succulentsandsunshine.com/fertilizer. Fertilize, not fertilizer. Succulentsandsunshine.com/fertilize Guys, I'll drop a bunch of links in after we're done here so you can click on those. But yeah, that is my post about fertilizing succulents, and it has some links to Annie's as well. And then how do you fertilize your propagation? Just the same way that I'm watering. So if I'm doing it with the leaf babies, then yeah, it's it's usually misting them. I have a sprayer. Normally you'd see it used to like do insecticide or something, but I have just like one of those hand pumping sprayers, and I use that on my leaves because I have so many of them. But yeah, you could just pour the Manure Tea Fertilizer into a water bottle or into whatever watering can you use and just apply it like that. It's pretty simple. Yeah. Patty, hi from Michigan. Oh, and Barb is to the rescue with, oh, nice, it's ahavenbrand.com. So she has the link in there for you guys as well. Guys, this has been super good. I'm glad we got some of your questions answered. I just want to finish up by saying, if you haven't already seen or heard, right now we have the Successfully Propagating Succulents course that's available, and in there I'm giving you step-by-step instructions for how to propagate from seeds, from leaves, from cuttings, and offsets. And all of the replays that we've done over the last week or two will also be added to that course once they're done. And it's just a really good tutorial. I walk you through each of those, tell you how to get started, and then how to get through the messy middle with a lot of those, and just make sure that your succulents are growing to adulthood. The other thing that's awesome about it is you have access to me to ask questions anytime that you want. So if you're struggling or you have a leaf baby that's dying, send me a picture and I can help you figure out what to do next to make it grow better. So all the information for that and the link to sign up is succulentsandsunshine.com/propagate. Today is the last day that is available to purchase. So you don't have to like watch the course today, but buy it today before it closes, because we're not going to open enrollment again until next spring, because I want to make sure that anyone who's in there, I want to kind of have us all propagate together, and then that way I can help you get through all of those tricky spots that you might run into. So I want to make sure I'm giving everyone who's in the course just really devoted attention and help with their propagation. So today's the last day to sign up, but then you can watch the videos anytime you want, whether it's next week or in a year or 2 years, whatever. You'll be able to watch them online or also download them to your phone or computer. I'm trying to think if there were any other questions with the course that we keep getting asked. Those are the biggest ones. You can watch it whenever you want. It's all on your own time. And then you can just ask me for questions or help with whatever you need. So again, that's at succulentsandsunshine.com/propagate. And that is the Successfully Propagating Succulents course. Get it tonight before midnight, Pacific Daylight Time. And if you guys have any questions as you're watching the replay, feel free to leave them in the comments. And I'm going to come back and try and get to as many of those as possible as well. Thank you guys so much for joining me live. You had awesome questions, and I'm so glad we were able to answer them for you. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys later.